Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Jolly SEO's TLDR. We have Debbie Chu here today, SEO Manager at Stripe. Debbie, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, no worries. And thank you for having me. I'm happy to talk to you about SEO and kind of, see where this conversation takes us.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited. Last time we met, we were on the Gray Dots podcast, and we were
Yes.
really focused on link building. And at that time, you were at a smaller company without being disparaging at all. I run a small company. They're probably much bigger than me. But this conversation we wanted to talk about, for a lot of us, it's almost intimidating to think about either working with or working at an enterprise company. So we wanted to talk about what are the differences? How did you transition? And I really appreciate your time today as we dive into this.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to kind of talk through it. I joined Stripe August of last year. So I've been here for a few months. It feels like a lot of time has passed, but everything still seems new to me. And then prior to that, I was at Dialpad. The company size, although is like maybe like roughly 1,000 or so. When I joined, it was like maybe 800 or something like that. But overall, like the marketing team at Dialpad was just much smaller compared to at Stripe, where there's so many people. Even at Dialpad, I felt like there's a lot of people I've never met, and then it's even more so at Stripe, where it's just there's a lot of people within like the greater marketing team that I have also never met.
Yeah, I can imagine. And that's on me. I didn't realize Dialpad was so large as it was, right? So I guess let's start there. In your mind, what's the distinction? Where's that line? Is Dialpad an SMB? Is Stripe Enterprise? Maybe as an
Yeah.
outsider, I don't even have a clue.
Yeah, no, no. I think when I was at Dialpad, I thought I was maybe doing like something like enterprise SEO. And then when I joined Stripe, it's like, oh yeah, I definitely was not doing enterprise SEO. So like I think despite, Dialpad having approximately like the size of a potential enterprise, it still operated very or like it was a lot more kind of like startup-y, like pre-IPO, but also post sort of early startup stage. But essentially, I think at Dialpad, there were a lot of things that we could much more easily get buy-in for. Whereas at Stripe, there's a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different teams that have their hands in various areas. So then you really have to work with a bunch of different people to try to even like get your idea through the door.
Yeah, I'm so curious about that. Just jumping ahead, thinking about the stakeholders here. Well, I imagine this could slow you down a little bit, right? I, these are things, honestly, as a vendor, I've noticed as well. People we work with in-house, they're like, I'd love to, but my hands are kind of tied here. So
Yeah.
you're gonna have to give me some time. Uh, what what are what are your thoughts? Like, could slow you down, but also it seems like potentially can make you more intentional, more thoughtful, because you're thinking now about UX, the user experience. You're thinking about brand reputation. Whereas imagine previously you notice a technical error, you can go ahead and make a change, and then later maybe hear from the sales team like, oh no, we really wanted that for that reason.
Yeah, no, I think you do a really good call out of like there's just a lot before we maybe even decide to go do a project. There's a lot of work that we need to do for like months ahead to kind of lay that foundation and really think about, what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and then who are the users that we're trying to solve for, and then okay, if we were that user, let's think through every single thing that can go wrong in this process and kind of like maybe let's first have like a few iterations of what we think would be a good SEO page, for example, and then let's test it out and maybe get some user feedback and then iterate on it. So like because of all the different complexities with that, what you mentioned earlier, like a lot of projects tend to take a lot longer than I had originally expected. So I think when I joined Stripe and really like entered the world of enterprise SEO, I thought like the main thing you think of is like, oh, big budget. Now I could work with a huge
Hmm.
budget, something along those lines, right? But then what you realize is that with big budget comes a lot of scrutiny on like everything that you want to use that budget for. So then, there's with your big budget, there's like hundreds or thousands of things that you could do. And then if you choose A, B, and C, then everyone's going to be like, are you sure A, B, and C is like the right one? Is it not? Why aren't we doing D, F, G, H, whatever? And so that's kind of like where a lot of time is spent on like educating stakeholders, getting aligned with stakeholders on like, why are we doing it this? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing it this way and not this other way? So you have to kind of look at everything from like a ton of different lenses. One chart that I found was really helpful that Aleda had shared in her talk was like, I'll send you a picture, but essentially it's like a let's see, the vertical axis is SEO execution, and then the horizontal one is company size. So
Mm-hmm.
for flexibility, as your company size gets larger, the flexibility goes down. And then although like resources goes up, so smaller companies, less resources, large company, more resources, resources go up, but also bureaucracy and the need for alignment goes up. So essentially what this graph is saying, like for enterprise companies, your flexibility to do certain things is going to be very small. So you have to do it in a very specific way. And then there's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tape, and kind of just making sure that all the stakeholders are aligned before you can even go forth. So again, that goes back to like, because of these complexities, getting things done takes just a lot longer than it would be at a smaller company.
Yeah. Yeah, I have some younger kids, so forgive the Spider-Man quote, but it's with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
You got to be careful with all that you wield there. That's really cool. That's great insight. I'm really curious. I was there must have been a little bit of culture shock coming in for you. I'm curious about two things. Like what was something you were kind of bracing yourself for, but actually wasn't an issue that you were kind of getting ready to deal with? And like what's something, not even an issue, but something that surprised you? It could have been maybe more flexibility on one front than you were expecting, or team dynamic, I'm not sure. Because I would imagine coming in, you have expectations and reality doesn't always jive with those.
Yeah. So I think one thing that I had expected was like previously at Dialpad, I worked closely with like certain partners. So for example, like Demand Gen was a big partner because I was doing like link building related stuff. I worked closely with PR team. And then also we like the marketing team at Dialpad was very close with the sales team. And like these were actually teams that I don't really work with regularly at Stripe. Like I
Mm.
can kind of tap onto their shoulder, but like most of the time, like most of the things that I need to focus on aren't really related to those teams. It's related to other teams. So I think I had expected to work with, certain cross-functional partners, but in reality, it ended up being other cross-functional partners. So I think that was kind of the big thing. And I think the other thing that I realized early on when I joined Stripe was that like although I was hired for like, okay, I've done these SEO things, I have like a certain amount of SEO skills and experience, but the what is the most important is actually all the soft skills that I had picked up throughout my time. So you end up at enterprise SEO, you're using a lot more of your soft skills than like leaning on your SEO knowledge, because you have to again get that buy-in with a bunch of different stakeholders, and everyone is kind of like in a sense fighting for resources, and so you need to try to figure out how do we align with everybody so that we can kind of get what we need.
That's fascinating. And again, I really appreciate for everyone listening, there are some things Debbie can't talk about, right?
Yeah.
Because this is a large company. And as a Stripe customer, I appreciate that. Like there's some things that you don't want shared. That's why we use Stripe. It's great. But I'm curious, like what, if you can share, are we talking about like politicking, or it's not necessarily that cynical? It's more that, there's just so many people and you need to be respectful of the work they're doing. And I guess to layer on a third question there, or a second question, what's the way that you all stay aligned? Is there a system in place like OKRs or something like that? Like what are you all using to, because you must not want to reach out every time you want to do something. There has to be a central place you can go, some source of truth to know like I'm moving in the general direction as everyone.
Yeah, so at Stripe, we really like to like document everything. So there's a lot of documentation, there's a lot of slides. That also creates a lot of work that you need to kind of do beforehand before you approach someone to kind of like, okay, maybe ask that person for, can you share any documentation that you have on this question that I might have? And then you kind of read through everything and then kind of, okay, I understand, like I kind of level set with that person. And then now I can kind of ask the question that is still on my, that hasn't been answered. So we do rely a lot on documentation. The other thing is just kind of having a like alignment meetings with different stakeholders, kind of being a fly on the wall in certain calls, even though like it's not a call that's necessarily about SEO, but then there might be decisions made in that meeting that might be relevant to SEO. So I want to make sure that I'm in those calls so that it's likely that the people in that call, they don't know that maybe this decision will affect SEO. And so I need to make sure that I'm in those all those conversations so that I can kind of be like, hey, we should make sure to watch out for this if we make this change. So I think that's kind of something that I've realized in the past few months at Stripe, is that like there's a lot of things going on and I kind of need to make sure that SEO is in those conversations just in case, something, a decision is made and it will affect SEO. So we want to make sure that everyone is cognizant about that. And then I guess on the other hand, we can also show the value of SEO, kind of like, hey, you didn't think about this. And then now I'm going to kind of let you know, like, oh, these are the risks. This is what we need to think about. And then that kind of educates that group of people about where the value of SEO comes from.
Yeah, really interesting. So it sounds like there's a lot of open doors for you. You can jump in and at least be fly on the wall or participate when you feel like you're a stakeholder yourself.
Yeah, I think I would thank my manager for kind of figuring out where all those doors are to really lay that groundwork for me to kind of jump in. But at the same time, like again with enterprise SEO, the org is so huge. There's so many different things that we're working on. Sometimes there are going to be instances where I have a very specific, maybe technical SEO question, and I need to go through like different people to figure out like who actually knows the answer, because everyone has kind of like their own swim lane, but then there's like a ton of swim lanes.
Yeah.
And so you have to spend some time to figure out like, okay, I'll ask this person. If this person doesn't know, they'll point me to this other person. So I have to like go around and like figure out who are the right people to ask questions to.
It's amazing. I mean, you're talking about thousands of people, I'm sure. So you're you got to be ping ponging a little bit some of the time. Okay,
Yeah.
I have a really selfish question, Debbie. I'm a vendor, right? I like working with
Yes.
enterprise clients. I like working with SMBs. We like working with different types of clients for different reasons. But I'm curious, how has your perception changed about vendors? And at Dialpad, maybe you didn't have need of some, or maybe you did. But now that you're at Stripe, maybe you have need of different vendors, but not the same as before. What role do you see vendors playing in terms of interfacing with enterprise companies?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I would say from my experience at Dialpad, we were using vendors, but the main thing was that the types of SEO services that we need are kind of different from Stripe, just because Stripe already has branding, for example. And so there are things like link building, which we don't really need to focus on compared to at Dialpad, where the brand awareness isn't as high. And then also like Dialpad was in a space where a lot of keywords that we wanted to rank for are very competitive, and so you just need to have links to even show up on page one. And so those are kind of some of the key things that I think are different, is just the problems that you have to deal with for a smaller company tends to be different from the problems that an enterprise company needs to deal with. So I think those are generally kind of the main differences. I would say like overall, if I was speaking to an agency and trying to give them advice, I think the main one is just like, hey, really listen to the client and what are their constraints. Don't assume that what they're working with. Like all kind of like some of the complexities that I alluded on earlier. Like maybe you might have helped their competitor do XYZ and that did really well for them. That's great, but like if you were to copy and paste that playbook to this other enterprise client, it may or may not work because of the constraints that they're working with. So keep it really like open mind and really try to understand like, okay, here are all the different constraints that this client is working with, and then how do I strategize and figure out something specific for them. And I think that's going to be what would resonate the most.
Yeah, very interesting. We've failed in some proposals and succeeded in others, and I think that's spot on. I mean, where we've failed is literally, let's copy this proposal as a template, modify. It seems very appropriate to their situation, but we really weren't listening well enough to what they were telling us. And
Mm,
even more so, we weren't asking the questions where we had gray areas we weren't sure about. We should have asked more
mm,
questions, I think. Uh, Thanks for that. So that was my selfish question. A lot of our audience actually will be like solopreneurs or more junior SEOs, I think. Those considering either in-house or consulting type work. You've already done a couple, from what I perceive on LinkedIn, right? Successful career leaps. You went from content writer to SEO, which is kind of near and dear to my heart because I was a content writer. We still do like a pretty heavily writing based service here. But now
mm.
you've gone from SEO at, like you said, 800,000 person company to a much larger company with a much more recognizable brand. For those people who are looking similar to you, either that first jump, but really the second jump you've made, like let's call it level up without any kind of connotations attached, but it is just a different scale you're at. But they're not having any luck. Maybe they're applying with jobs or, sending out RFPs or things like that. Do you have any practical advice? What do you think was really the tweak? You mentioned soft skills. What do you think people can do?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, there's a few things. If you don't have a community that you can kind of find people who maybe have similar concerns as you, or like are maybe a step above you, to try to find that community and try to build sort of a network of mentors and people who can advocate for you. I think that's one thing that really helped me break out of my shell, I would say, and give me a bit more confidence to be like, hey, I've been doing SEO for a while. Like, I I can actually share some of the things that I've learned and feel encouraged to share and not be afraid of like what people might think. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of something. And I think all that ties back to like really working on your personal brand. I think a lot of the opportunities that I received in the past few years were because I really focused on kind of marketing myself, not just doing marketing for a company, but actually like using those skills that I've learned throughout the years of how to do marketing and then applying it to myself and kind of work on that personal brand so that that kind of sort of be echoed across the industry, I would like ideally. And so I think that's kind of what has been the most helpful for me. So if you have, you know, any interesting projects, maybe things not necessarily interesting to you, but potentially interesting to other people who might be in sort of your footsteps. Kind of think about like what can you share with the world, and then start doing that, and kind of building that community with other people, and then I think that will really do wonders for you.
Yeah, that's amazing. I just want to kind of underscore that for people. Engaging in communities is a great way to build your brand. You can just start in the comments. You don't, if you're suffering from a little bit of like either imposter syndrome or just maybe you're not confident because really you haven't done a lot yet or you haven't put yourself out yet, you don't have to make a fresh post. You don't have to worry like people are going to jump on it in the comments. You can just in the comments of someone else's post engage a little bit at a time or in a
Mm,
thread. I I wanted to ask you specifically about the community. I've heard amazing things about women in tech SEO. Is
yes.
that the community you're referencing, or is there another one you might recommend?
Yeah, so I that one is definitely the one that really, I want to say, changed the trajectory of my SEO career. I'm
That's
super
awesome.
thankful to Reach. I joined the community because I wanted to have a mentor within SEO, and it was something that I've wanted for a long time, but I didn't really get. And so the mentorship aspect of the community was a huge reason why I had joined the community. And from there, like it really, my I guess I feel like my career kind of took off in a sense. Like for example, there's like a promote me channel within the community. So like if you write something on LinkedIn or something like that, you can post it in the channel and ask for people to help engage with the content or even give you feedback, and that kind of starts building your personal confidence, and that's what I found super helpful. So yeah, I totally recommend that community. There's also another community that I'm not super involved in, but I wanted to give a shout out was Noah Lerner's SEO community. That one has been ramping up as well. So if you're a woman, definitely join Women in Tech SEO. If you're not, feel free to join the SEO community.
Yeah, thanks. That's a new one for me. So I'm always looking for places to engage. And let's not dismiss the side benefit is you do learn stuff in these communities,
Yes.
right? Like it's really helpful actually. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
that's
I
awesome.
think it's definitely something that you should do if you're not already doing it.
Yeah, no, thanks for that tip. I think it's easy to downplay it. In case it's helpful for people as a vendor, I'm not an individual, but that's where the majority of Jolly's business comes from, is engaging in communities. Aside from referrals, people want to interact with a real human. They don't
Yeah.
just like looking at our LinkedIn company page, right? Like that's not where it happens. So cool. Well, I came with what I thought were okay questions, but I always like to end these interviews with what did I forget to ask? Because we're really here to learn from you. So is there anything that you're like, I don't know why he didn't want to talk about this, but this is what people really want to know right now?
No, I feel like thank you for your questions. I think they're really good. I don't have any like questions that I feel like you left out. I think if you want to learn more about enterprise SEO, I would highly recommend Daniel Chung's Enterprise SEO newsletter on LinkedIn. I found that super valuable. He's a SEO manager at Adobe, and he's been at Enterprise SEO for longer than I have been. So I've also found his like insights super helpful. So I definitely would subscribe to that. And so if enterprise SEO is an area that you want to tap into, like kind of figure out like what are the enterprise SEO companies that you look up to, and find those SEO managers or directors on LinkedIn and start following them and seeing that the content that they put out. I think that will really help you understand what sort of the different skills needed to do enterprise SEO.
Yeah, it's like an indirect mentorship of sorts, right? You can follow
Right.
them, ghost shadow kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
great, great advice. Debbie, thank you very much for your time. I hope we can do this again. It's nice to see you again, and I hope people learned a lot. Where can they learn from you if you don't mind them reaching out and asking you some questions?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can also go to my personal website, which I feel like I should probably update, debbieychu.com. I'll share a link to that. And then I also like regularly write for the Wix SEO blog. And so I'm actually writing a post on kind of like the first 90 days of doing a new like SEO job. And so if that's something that you're interested in, definitely check that out when it's live,
That's
hopefully soon.
awesome. Yeah, very timely. Thank you so much, Debbie.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.